Hi, so for today we'll be showing how to use Dora to create this wonderful AirPods Pro website layout. So it contains off-screen animations, videos, and etc. And you will be able to accomplish all these easily through Dora. For now, we're gonna start our building process. Let me just open a new project. By default, it's gonna give you a desktop view, and this is good for our project. For today's tutorial, this will include the first screen and the second screen as well. So for this first screen, we could see there's navigation. We could see there's a hero section with the earphones and the AirPods, and also some buttons as well. So the first thing we'll do is to start with the navigation bar. So for the navigation bar, I will be using the component function here. This is not so necessary for only building the first homepage, but it's really useful when you're building your whole website because component allows you to use things again and again. And when you change it, it just boom, changes in every page you have. So this is gonna speed up your design process. So for the navigation bar, I will set the size to the height of 52 and give it a black color background and type in AirPods Pro 2nd generation. And let's set the width as HUD contents. The size of the box would automatically change when you set it as HUD contents. And the type size for this should be 21. And then now I'm using the constraint function. So here I just want to stop for a moment and take some time to explain what constraint layout in Dora means. So now I have switched to Dora's constraint layout tutorial, and I'm just going to explain a little bit about this position constraint. So as you can see on the left hand side, there's a GIF. You can just bind the things together. And what we will do here is, for example, I'm binding the left hand side of the orange block to the right hand side of this right block. On the right hand side, we could see there's like 100 pixel gap between these two stuffs. And if I expand this stuff, even though this one is changing, this orange thing is still having a 100 pixel gap between it. And we could do something like center as well. For example, I am aligning the top of the blue to the top of the orange, bottom to bottom. And then even though I move up, the blue always stays center with this orange thing. Or, for example, I put this blue inside of the orange box. And then I use the align center feature, align horizontal centers feature here. So now no matter how big the orange box is, the blue always is in the horizontal center of this orange container. So there are shortcuts here you could see. And this is really helpful when you're building responsive websites because you can set the gap between stuffs. You could constrain images or text into a specific place of your container. Then I would create the small buttons on the right hand side as well. For this, I'm gonna use 12 point size. And then I'm gonna draw the blue button as well. So for this, we will use the container feature. Set the correct size, which is 45 by 24. And let's just set the color into the mid-tone blue they have there. And then set the radius to 20. Then it's gonna give us a nice button look. And now you just drag the text in the left-hand side, the layer part. We're gonna set this as both vertical and horizontal center. And next, I'm gonna put the space between the text. So each is 24. This is the spacing between them. And then for the button with the text, I'm gonna put it as 30. Then I will group all of them together and then set this to the right hand. So this is gonna fix it. So I went back to check their website. So it's actually a gray color instead of a fully black. So I'm gonna change that as well. They also have a gray stroke on the bottom, so I'm gonna set it inside the stroke as well. And I'll set it as 1 pixel. And I will choose the gray color. Group all the contents together into a fixed width. And when I go back, and this time if I drag this thing in and then set the width to fill container, background is still gonna expand. However, the information will stay centered just like how the Apple's website has designed it to be. So next step, let's create the hero part. I'm gonna put all the type in. Let's type in AirPods Pro. So I just changed all the fonts of the project to SourceSense Pro, and then you can use whatever you want here. And I would set the letter spacing to -3% to match the filling more. And then the type size for this, let's make it to 230. This is almost like the size as it's in the Apple website. And then I'm going to create the small text as well. And then for the all new, let's do it in green. And then for the buttons, I'm gonna do it separately. So one thing is that there actually is a small icon there. The credit here goes to ByteDance icon park, and I'm using the play button and the right arrow as well. So I'm just gonna click copy PNG and go back to Dora and press Ctrl V or Command V if you're on a Mac, and then let's size it down to like 20 by 20 and place it just to the right of each button. And remember to set the constraint between the button and the text, and we're gonna group them together. I'm grouping the text with the button and also the two groups together as well. So next I will be importing the AirPods image inside, which is the animation thing. So I will drag this image box by using this image feature. And then there's one thing to note here is the width and the height. Instead of setting it into a specific value, I'm gonna do something like this, 100 VW, 100 VH. So what VH and VW means, VW stands for viewport width, VH stands for viewport height. So viewport is like the size of your browser. At the right hand side assets, we could use a select source. We use the second button to upload image sequence. So image sequence allows you to create scroll animation inside of Dora. So if currently you have a video that you want to like do scroll animation in Dora, you could just turn it into image sequence. There's like online tools you could use, or you could use media encoder from Adobe. They all work. So it's just like changing videos into like frames of JPEG or PNG. We're back. The image sequence is loaded successfully. I want to talk about like what's the difference between like setting viewport and view height. So now, for example, I am creating a box, and then the size is 1440 by 1026. It's like full screen right now because this matches the size of the canvas. But if I go to publish and view it in the browser, you will see something like this. Why? Because the current viewport of my monitor is larger than the size that I set here. But if we do something like this, we set this as 100 VW, 100 VH, and we go there. Now it's full screen. It's just gonna like move according to the size of our browser. If you want something to be responsive, remember to set it to like VH and VW. Since the AirPods is actually in like the top part of the image, I would set the constraint to vertical, center, and horizontal first. Then I'm gonna do a negative like -20 VH on the top. And also I'm gonna be changing my naming as well, as you can see on the left hand side. Having a good naming system is gonna help you find your stuff easier, because sometimes if all the names is just like text 1, text 2, text 3, then it's hard for you to know what it is. And now let's step into the animation part. Hopefully you have watched our keyframe onboarding tutorial already. And then so here we could see how the animation is working. Image sequence is moving on the front, and in the back, the AirPods text is enlarging and it's fading away. And then the two small text is only fading away. So here I'm gonna group the two small text together so I can control them together. This is gonna make it easier. And one thing to note about here is just now, even though I have set my constraints already, but now since I have changed the container, you have to set them again. And here I would create a large container to drop everything together, because I just think about if I have more than like one screen in the whole website layout, then having different containers to control different stuff is gonna make things more clean and easier to source. So now let's start the animation part. Let's open the keyframe panel on the top right corner. And then what you will see is called drivers on the page. And then if we click on the S1 container in the layers, we would see another new button says add a driver from S1 container 1. So for here, let me show you a really simple animation to demonstrate it. And now we have everything on the drivers page 2, which is this whole page. And if I drag, when the viewport change, the number is moving, right? First, the number in section 1 moves, then the number in section 2 moves. However, say I don't want this section 1 right now. I only want this section 2, and I move it to the top. And I start animate again. It's not gonna animate. It's not animate in the right time, right? Because what we want is when this is just moving, we want it to move immediately, but not when this is out of the viewport. And if we're using the driver, this is because everything is happening according to this absolute scroll Y value, which is the height of this page. But if we add a driver from specific container, we are using an offset Y, which is like a relative value. It's the Y value of this container, not this whole page. So for now, it looks the same, right? It's moving, and then when the viewport changes, the second part is changing as well. However, see, if I don't want this, I delete this. Or say I change the direction, right? And then I start from the top. As I drag, as this enters the viewport, it's moving. And then as the viewport enters the first section, the one is gonna change as well. So this is why we want to use the driver instead of page if we want it to be more flexible. So for here, we're going to select S1 container, and then we will click add a driver from container 1. And let's go back to the earpod sequence. And on the right hand side, you can see there's a frame setting. If you drag it, then it starts to animate. So what we will have to do is set a keyframe on the first, and then set a keyframe on the last frame. So for here, I'm gonna start with 100, because 100 means that the viewport is fully 100% goes into this container already. So we're gonna start from that. And I want this animation to be completed in a whole, like 100 VH, which is a whole page scroll. So I'm gonna go to 200 and set the current frame to 65. Now, as you can see in the website, even though I'm scrolling my mouse, but actually everything is changing, but it's still fixed in the center. So this is what I'm gonna do to my container as well. Select the S1 container, at 100, click on the pin, and it will help you to fix your view. And then go to the last frame, which is 200, and then say unfix. What this means is that when between 100 and 200, every element is gonna follow the viewport. But when it goes to 200, the view is not fixed anymore. And now we will set the fading effect of the two small texts. And then since I have set the group just now, I will just start it. And now I'm still starting from 140, and then I will put a keyframe. And now the opacity is 100%. Then I will drag to 152, and then set the opacity to 0. And now if you drag through, you would see the text is starting to fade. And next, let's start to set the airport section titles animation. I'm going to start as 145. And then I'm going to go to 155, add another keyframe. And now I'm gonna set the type size to 260. Since I have the constraints, as I change the type size, everything is gonna just expand and it still stays in the center. And now I'm gonna move forward to 170. And then I'm gonna set the opacity at 0. And what's after here is we see there's a text coming out called rebuild the sound up. And I'm gonna just type that out quickly. The type size here I'm using is 110, and then spacing is -3%, and I'm gonna give it a center as well. I'm just gonna drag on the time frame to check which is the right spot for this text to come in. And now I'm going to set the animation of this one, and then let's start from 194. We will do this opacity at 0 with the type size of 110. And then when it comes to 204, it's 100% with the type size of 115. And then when it goes to 220, the opacity will be 0 and type size will be the same. One thing you might notice here is currently the text is not really centered within, and then the earpods is going away. It's because just now I set the fixed view to 200 keyframes. That is for that point, but now I realize this time frame is not long enough. I want it to still be fixed when this text comes out. So I'm just going to expand the time frame of the S1 container to around 220. And then the next part of this animation, we could see a paragraph, and then there's a highlight. The highlight changes as we scroll, and there's a background video as well. So first I will just drag the video inside. Just click on the image and select the third tab, and then select the video you want. And then you will see that. Here I'm setting it as 100 VW, 100 VH as well. And then I'm gonna create another container for section 2, which holds the paragraph. After checking back to this animation, like how things are coming, the timing thing, my decision is to put the video with the first container since the video comes right after the rebuild from the sound up. And the paragraph is coming up after the text disappears, so it will be great to just separate it into another container, which is section 2. So now I'm dragging in the video to the container 1. And then at 205, I'm gonna just set the keyframe. And after go back into 204, I'm gonna set the view as false, which means that it's not able to see at 204. But when we go back to 205, you can see it. And then this will all show all the way until 245. I'm just gonna add a keyframe at there as well to make sure that the container view is fixed. To make sure that this is fixed with the viewport, I'm just gonna expand the containers frame as well, just as like what I did just now. I'm just gonna drag the last keyframe to 245. Oops, it should be 250. At 250, I'm gonna set the video's opacity as 0, so there is a nice, smooth, gentle fade out. And now I'm just gonna copy the text from the website. And let's just size it down to 56 with a 0 spacing. And then the line hash would be 56 as well. And then to create this effect, this like scrolling changing effect, we would have to separate everything out, like sentence by sentence. So I'm just gonna copy everything out. I actually did another bottom layer there, is just for reference. Make sure that I'm putting the text in the correct place. And then for some of the sentence, if there's a short left behind, you could separate into 2 sentences so it's easier to align. I'm just gonna group them together in a container. And then I'm just gonna set the constraints of the left and the top as well. And then for this container, I would put it inside of container 2, and then give it a horizontal center and then a vertical top this time, because I want the animation to start right after it enters this container. See, after this rebuild from the sound off has disappeared, this AirPods Pro comes right after. So putting it at the top would be a good place, and we're gonna start this animation after this viewport is just entering. Since we want the animation to happen right when the container is coming inside of our view instead of like after the whole container is inside of the view. So this time we're gonna add a driver from S2 container, and we'll start from 0. So for the first one, I will start at 0 and set the opacity of color as 100, and the second at 20, 100 as well, the third one at 30, and the opacity is 15%. And for sentence 2, I'm going to start as 30 with 15%, 40 with 100%, 50, 100%, 60, 15%. 3, I'm going to start at 55 with 15%, 65, 100%, 75, 100%, 85, 15%. Sentence 4A is the similar pattern, 80, 15%, 90, 100%, 100, 100%, 110, 15%. 4A and 4B is the same group, so we're just gonna copy the whole setting. For 5A, start at 105 with 15%, and 115 is 100%. It will not fade away, so we're just gonna stop here. 5B is the same as 105, 15%, and 115, 100%. And close the background color as well. So for here, the animation part is done, and then I'm gonna set the nav bar as a fixed view as well. You only need to set this in the page scroll by. And now let's scroll and see how it works. Oops, it seems that the video is disappearing too early, so I'm gonna just drag it a bit. And then I'm gonna set it to 400, when the video is disappearing. And I would move the S1 containers and to 400 as well. Here's all for creating this beautiful animation inside Dora, and it's really easy, so you could go try it right now. And hopefully this tutorial is useful for you, and let's see you next time. Bye!